The Iliad by Homer, Book 2. The other gods and the men who marshal chariots slept through the night, but sweet sleep evaded Zeus, for he debated in his mind how to honor Achilles and slay many beside the Achaean ships. He soon concluded that the best plan was to send a terrible dream to Atreus' son, Agamemnon. So he called to dream with his winged words. Go quickly, destructive dream, to the swift ships of the Achaean, and there you will enter the tent of Agamemnon and whisper to him this message. Tell him to quickly arm the long-haired Achaeans, for the time has come to seize Troy's wide streets. The gods with homes on Olympus are no longer divided, for Hera has bent their minds to her will, and Troy has been fated for sorrow and death. So he spoke, and when Dream heard these words, he quickly set off for the Achaean swift ships. When he reached Agamemnon's tent, he found the son of Atreus fast asleep in ambrosial slumber. He stood over him in the form of Nestor, son of Neleus, whom Agamemnon honors above all others. In this guise, divine Dream addressed him. Why do you sleep, son of Atreus, tamer of horses? It is unwise to spend all night at rest when leading an army and making so many difficult decisions. Now listen, for I bring words from Zeus, who, while far away, still cares for you and pities you. You must quickly arm the long-haired Achaeans, for the time has come to seize Troy's wide streets. The gods, with homes on Olympus, are no longer divided, for Hera has bent their minds to her will, and Troy has been fated for sorrow and death by Zeus's order. Remember these words. Do not let them escape when you wake from sleep slumber. Dream finished and departed, leaving the king to consider in his heart things that were never to be. He foolishly wished to attack Priam's city on this day, unaware that Zeus already had a plan to inflict great pain and suffering on both Trojans and Danaans by bringing them into violent conflict. He awoke from sleep with the divine voice pooling in his ears. He sat up straight, donned his soft, newly made tunic, covered it with his large cloak, laced a pair of sandals to his shining feet, and hung his silver-studded sword over his shoulders. Then he seized his father's imperishable scepter and carried it over to the ships of the bronze-clad Achaeans. And when dawn rose on high Olympus, declaring daylight's arrival to Zeus and the other immortals, Agamemnon ordered the clear-voiced herald to summon the long-haired Achaeans to assembly. The cry went out, and the army quickly gathered. First, he called for the council of elders to sit beside the ship of Nestor, the king born in Pylos. And when all had assembled, he revealed his plan. Listen, friends. Last night, while I slept, a dream from the gods came to me in a form that looked like noble Nestor in features and stature and build. It stood over my head and spoke these words. Why do you sleep, son of Atreus, tamer of horses? It is unwise to spend all night at rest when leading an army and making so many difficult decisions. Now listen, for I bring word from Zeus, who, while far away, still cares for you and pities you. You must quickly arm the long-haired Achaeans, for the time has come to seize Troy's wide streets. The gods with homes on Olympus are no longer divided, for Hera has bent their minds to her will, and Troy has been fated for sorrow and death by Zeus's order. Remember these words. When finished, Dream left, and I awoke from sweet sleep. So let us go now and arm Achaea's sons. But first I will test their mettle, as is tradition, and order them to take their ships and flee, while the rest of you order them to hold back. And when he finished, he returned to his seat, and Nestor, king of sandy Pylos, stood to address the assembly with the best of intentions, saying, Friends, leaders, and rulers of the Argives, if any other Achaean had told us this dream, we would call it a lie and turn our backs on it. But he who claims to be the greatest Achaean saw it. So let us go and arm the Achaean sons. He finished and led the way out of the council. The scepter bearing kings obediently followed their leader, and the soldiers hurried after them. In the same way that thick swarms of bees burst out of hollow rocks in ever renewing waves, and then fly in grape like bunches over the spring flowers, some going this way, others going that way. So, too, did the troops march in formation from the ships and huts by the shore of the sea, to the place of assembly. With them was Rumor, messenger of Zeus, inciting them like a blazing fire. The assembly was a riot of noise, the earth groaning under the men as they sat, and 9 heralds trying to halt the men's cries, so the Zeus blessed king's words could be heard. The men eventually took their seats, and the noise dropped until all fell silent. Then Agamemnon stood and held the scepter forged by Hephaestus. Hephaestus had given it to Lord Zeus, Cronos' son, who gave it to the swift appearing messenger. Then Hermes gave it to Pelops, driver of chariots, and Pelops gave it to Atreus, shepherd of men. When Atreus died, it was given to Thyestes, rich in flocks, and Thyestes left it for Agamemnon to carry as he ruled many islands and all of Argos. He leaned on the scepter and addressed the Argives. Friends, heroes of Danaan, comrades of Ares, great Zeus, son of Cronos, has ensnared me in folly, for he promised me, with a nod of assent, that I would sack great Ilios before going home. But that was a foul trick, and now I must return to Argos in shame, having lost many men. Such are the pleasures of all-powerful Zeus, who has raised many cities and will destroy many more, for his strength is greatest of all. And those living in the days to come will learn of our shame, how a vast and brave Achaean army fought a fruitless battle against an outnumbered enemy in a war with no end in sight. If all Achaeans and Trojans were willing to swear oath offerings and number both sides, and if all Trojans were counted, and if all Achaeans were arranged into troops of 10, and if each troop took a Trojan to pour our wine, then many companies would be without a cupbearer. I tell you, this is how far the Achaeans outnumber the Trojans who live in the city. But they have spear-wielding allies from many foreign cities who fight me off, beat me back, and prevent me from sacking and pillaging crowded Ilios. Now 9 years have passed for mighty Zeus. The timber on our ships decays, our cables rot, and our wives and children all sit in the great halls waiting for our return. Still, the task that brought us to this place still has not been accomplished. So this is my commandment for all to obey. Let us sail back home to our beloved fatherlands, for we shall never capture Troy's wide streets. So he spoke, stirring the souls of those not privy to the council's plans, and the assembly moved like the long waves of the Icarian Sea, kindled by east and south winds that swoop down from the clouds of Father Zeus. just as the west wind moves with a blustering rage over the deep standing corn, flattening the stalks, so also moved the assembly. As the men raced to their ships, their trampling feet lifted clouds of dust high into the air, while calls rang out to fasten the ships and draw them into the sea. And as slipways were cleared and props removed, the cries for home reached up to the heavens. And the Argives would have returned home before their fated time, had Hera not said to Athena, "Alas, child of Aegis, bearing Zeus, tireless one, is this the way the Argives plan to flee over the broad back of the sea to their fatherlands? Are they leaving Priam and the Trojans to claim as triumph Argive Helen, for whom so many Achaeans have perished in Troy, far from home? Go quickly through the Achaean army, and use your soothing voice to hold back each man and stop them from dragging their ships to the sea." So saying, gleaming-eyed Athena obeyed, quickly rushing down from the Olympian peaks to the nimble Achaean ships. There she found Odysseus, Zeus's equal in council, standing at rest. He had not yet fastened his benched ships, for his heart and soul were in pain. Bright-eyed Athena stood near him and said, "Son of Laertes, sprung from Zeus, wily Odysseus, is this how you plan to return to your fatherland, jumping into your well-benched ships and fleeing? Are you leaving Priam and the Trojans to claim as triumph Argive Helen, for whom so many Achaeans have perished in Troy, far from home? Go quickly through the Achaean army, and use your soothing voice to hold back each man, and stop them from dragging their ships to the sea." Odysseus recognized Athena's voice and set off quickly, discarding his cloak, which was collected by his attendant, the herald of Ithaca, Eurybates. Going straight to Agamemnon, son of Atreus, he took from his father's imperishable scepter, and headed for the bronze-clad Achaean ships. And when he came upon a king or distinguished man, he spoke to him with gentle words of restraint. "It is wrong to threaten you like a frightened fool, but sit down and make your men sit as well. You do not yet know the mind of Atreus' son. He tests us now, but soon he will start to punish. Did we not hear all he said during council? May his anger not cause harm to Achaea's sons. The wrath of kings is great, for their honor comes from Zeus, and Counselor Zeus cherishes them." And when he saw a commoner who was shouting, he struck the man with his staff and exclaimed, "Sit down, keep still, and listen to the words of braver men than you, for you are a worthless coward, useless both in combat and in council. It is impossible for every Achaean to rule as king. Too many lords is a disaster. Let us have one leader, one king, to whom the son of Cronos has granted the scepter and the right to rule his people justly." So he expertly brought the army under control, and they hurried noisily back to the place of assembly like a thundering wave that crashes onto a vast beach as deep waters rage below. All sat down in their seats except for Thersites, the blowhard, whose disordered mind was filled with foul words, whose speech was a rambling, reckless roar against kings, and whose only goal was to win a laugh from the Argives. He was the ugliest of all who came to Ilios, bow-legged, lame in one foot, shoulders bent, body hunched over, and a sugar-loaf head sparsely covered with clumps of thin, woolly hair. He hated Achilles and Odysseus, and often quarreled with them, but now Agamemnon was the focus of his shrill shouts. And with him, too, the Achaeans also held violent anger and resentment in their hearts. With a great cry he confronted Agamemnon, Son of Atreus, what is wrong? What do you crave? Your tents are filled with bronze and many captured women, for we Achaeans grant you first choice whenever we sack a city. Or do you desire gold, which some Trojan will bring out of Ilios to pay the ransom for a son who I or another Achaean bound and carried away? Or do you desire a young girl for your bed, one you can hide away from others? It is a disgrace for a lord to lead his troops into danger. So, all you weak, despicable Achaean women, let us head home in our ships, and leave this man here so he can enjoy his prized toys in Troy. Then he will learn if he really does need our help, for he dishonored Achilles, a greater man than he, by seizing the man's prize and taking it away. And lucky for you, Achilles' heart is not filled with bile. Otherwise, that insult would have been your last. So Thersites spoke his abuse to Lord Agamemnon, but God, like Odysseus, quickly pounced on the man, glaring at him harshly and scolding him, saying, "You may be a clever speaker, Thersites, but only a fool quarrels with a king by himself. I think you are the basest, most pathetic of all who came with the sons of Atreus to Ilios. So keep your mouth shut, say no more about kings, and quit looking for an easy way home. We do not know how this business will end, if the Achaean sons will win or lose, live or die. But here you sit, showering this leader of men, Agamemnon, with insults and abuse simply because the Danaans have granted him prizes. But let me tell you what is going to happen now. If I discover you acting like a fool one more time, then may my head be ripped from my shoulders, and let no man call me father of Telemachus if I do not grab you and strip off your clothes, cloak, tunic, and all, and leave you naked and ashamed. Then I will beat you and kick you out of camp until you run crying to the swift ships." So saying, he took the golden scepter and beat Thersites until a swollen, bloody bruise covered his back and shoulders. Tears poured down as he doubled over in pain and fell, terrified, to the ground, trying in vain to dry his tears. Though troubled by the scene, the Achaeans still laughed and turned to each other, saying, "Amazing! Odysseus has performed countless good deeds as a counselor and a strategist, but this is by far his greatest gift to the Argives, putting this worthless, babbling fool in his place. To be sure, he and his oversized ego are not likely to be back to challenge kings with violent words." So they said. Then Odysseus, sacker of cities, stood, scepter in hand, next to bright-eyed Athena, who, in the guise of a herald, ordered the Achaeans, from those near by to those far away, to be silent and to listen to his words and consider his advice. With noble intent he addressed the assembly. "Son of Atreus, my king, the Achaeans seem ready to make you the most despicable man in the world, and to break the promise made before our journey from Argos, land of horses, that we not return home until we raze the walls and sack the city of Ilios. They act like children or old widows, whining to each other about going home. True, our troubles would make anyone wish for home, and anyone away from his wife for just a month is vexed, especially when wintry winds and stormy seas hold him back. But we have been here for 9 years already, and we are still here. I do not blame any Achaean for being impatient, but to remain so long and return home empty-handed would be a shame. So be patient, friends, and wait until we find out if Calchas's prophecies are true or not. We know the truth in our hearts, for we all witnessed it, those that death has not taken. It seems like only yesterday, when we gathered at Aulis. preparing to bring death to Priam and Troy. We were standing around a spring, preparing to offer a perfect hecatomb to the gods on a sacred altar near a plane tree and a shining stream, when an omen appeared. A terrifying blood-red serpent, sent to the light of day by Zeus himself, that quickly darted away from the altar and towards the plane tree. There, on a branch at the top of the tree, we saw 8 baby sparrows hiding in the leaves, and the mother who gave them life was the ninth. Then the serpent ate the pitiful creatures, and as the mother flew around mourning her little ones, he grabbed her by the wings and ate her as she cried. But once the creature had eaten the baby sparrows and their mother, wily counselor Zeus turned him to stone, and we stood there, struck dumb by these terrible omens. But Calchas was quick to divine their meaning, saying to us, "Why are long-haired Achaeans so silent? Great Counselor Zeus has given us a glimpse of the future that will be long in coming but never forgotten. Just as the serpent devoured the sparrow's babies, 8 in all, along with the mother, the ninth, so we shall wage war in Troy for that many years. Then in the 10th we will capture the city's streets." And just as Calchas said, now this has come to be. So come, hold fast, all you well-greaved Achaeans, for soon enough we will capture the city of Priam. So he spoke, and the Achaeans cheered heartily, the noise echoing all around the ships as they celebrated the words of God like Odysseus. Then Nestor, horseman of Gerenia, spoke. "Look now, you are all debating like little children who care nothing for the work of war. What happened to our compacts and our oaths? Why not throw in the fire our counsels, plans, wine-sealed vows, and handshakes sealed with trust? We have been too long arguing with useless words, but we are still unable to find any solutions. Son of Atreus, do not alter course. Hold to your will, and maintain command of the Achaeans in battle. As for those few who disagree with us, let them waste away. Their plan will amount to nothing, and they will leave for Argos before learning if the vow made by Aegis, bearing Zeus, is a lie or not. For I say, on the day the Argives boarded swift ships with weapons of destruction for Troy, Cronus' son nodded his head, sending lightning on our right and showing us favorable signs. Therefore, no one should be eager to return home until each man has slept with a Trojan's wife as payment for our fighting over Helen. But if anyone desires to return home, then let him try to take a well-benched black ship, so he may meet his death before the whole army. You, king, should listen and follow my counsel, for the advice I offer will be difficult to dismiss. Divide the men into tribes and clans, Agamemnon, so clans aid other clans and tribes other tribes. Should you do this, and should the Achaeans obey, you will know which leaders and men are cowardly and which are brave. For each clan will fight for itself, and you will know if it is heaven's will that you not sack the city or the cowardice and folly of your men." And when he finished, Agamemnon, lord of men, replied, "Again, old man, your words outshine all others. If Father Zeus, Athena, and Apollo granted me 10 counselors like Nestor from among the Achaeans, then we would soon bend Priam's city to our will, seize it with our hands, and raze it to the ground. Instead, Aegis bearing Zeus has given me sorrow, fruitless feuds, and futile arguments. Now Achilles and I are exchanging violent words over some young girl, and I was the first to become angry. But if we ever united in purpose, then we would send death to Troy without delay. Now let each man go to his meal and then prepare for battle. Sharpen your spear, polish your shield, feed your swift-footed horses, examine your chariot on both sides, and get ready for a long, dreadful day of battle against a fierce foe. But be warned, no rest will come until darkness falls. Your chest will be bathed in sweat from the large shield strap. Your hands will grow heavy, holding your spear, and your horse will be foaming as it strains from the pool of your well-crafted chariot. But if any man chooses to loiter by the curved ships, far from the fighting, then his fate is sealed. He will become a feast for dogs and crows. So he spoke, and the Argives roared like a wave crashing against a cliff when the south wind blows. A jutting crag shaped by countless surges formed by untold winds coming from all directions. They stood and scattered to the ships, built fires by their tents, and ate their meals. Each man made a sacrifice to his tribe's immortal god, and all prayed for death to pass them over in battle. But Lord Agamemnon offered a fat 5-year-old bull as a sacrifice to the mighty son of Cronos, and summoned all the noble Achaean leaders. Nestor was the first, followed by Idomeneus, the two Ajaxes, the son of Tydeus, and finally Odysseus, Zeus's equal in council. War crier Menelaus came on his own accord, for he knew what troubled his brother's heart. They took up barley and grains and surrounded the bull as Lord Agamemnon stood among them and prayed. Great and glorious Zeus, Lord of the black clouds, do not let the sun fall and darkness descend until I reduce Priam's palace to a smoldering ruin. Burn his gates to the ground, rip Hector's tunic from his body, drive a sword through his chest, and make his many comrades fall head first into the earth and bite the dust. But Zeus did not answer his prayer right away. He accepted the sacrifices, but intensified the war. Once prayers had been said and barley thrown, they drew back the head, slaughtered and skinned the bull, cut out the thighs, enclosed them in fat, and finally placed raw meat upon them. They burned these over leafless billets, the entrails skewered on a spit and held over a blazing fire. When the thighs were burnt, they tasted the entrails. Then the rest was cut into pieces, put on spits, roasted carefully, and taken out of the fire. And when the meal was ready, they feasted, and all were satisfied in equal measure. And after every man's desire for food and drink was sated, Nestor, horseman of Gerenia, was first to speak. Son of Atreus, Agamemnon, noblest of kings, the time for talking is over, for the task that Zeus has put into our hands can be delayed no longer. So let the heralds summon the bronze-clad Achaean soldiers to gather by the ships, and let us go as a group through the wide Achaean camp, so we can quickly rouse the fierce god of war. Agamemnon, ruler of men, heeded Nestor's advice and ordered the clear-voiced heralds to summon the long-haired Achaeans to battle. The men, hearing the call, gathered quickly. The kings near the Zeus-blessed son of Atreus marshaled their troops, and golden-eyed Athena followed them, holding the eternal aegis, covered with 100 tightly woven tassels, each one made of gold and worth 100 oxen. She rushed through the Achaean army, urging them forward, and within each man's heart she placed the might and vigor for a long and bitter battle. Soon, bloodlust replaced their desire to go back to the hollowed ships and go home to their families. Just as a baneful fire burning up a boundless woods on a mountain peak is visible from afar, so the shine from the marching sea of bronze soldiers was so bright it could be seen from the heavens. And just as flocks of winged birds, geese, cranes, and long-necked swans fly here and there across the meadows of Asia beside the river Cayster, delighting in the power of their wings and uttering cries as they move from one perch to the next, so the many tribes streamed from the ships and camps to the plains of the Scamander as the earth shook in terror from the trampling feet and hooves. They stood in the Scamander meadows in numbers as countless as the leaves and flowers of spring. And just as many swarms of flittering flies buzz about the shepherds' pens in springtime, when the buckets are overflowing with milk, so the hordes of long-haired Achaeans stood in the plain before the Trojans, waiting anxiously to destroy them. And just as goat herders easily separate scattered goats when mingled together in the pasture, so the leaders marshaled their forces into formation for the coming battle, including Lord Agamemnon. His eyes and head like Zeus, who hurls thunderbolts, his waist like Ares, and his chest like Poseidon. And just as a bull stands out among a herd of oxen, when all are gathered together, so on this day did Zeus ensure that the son of Atreus would shine brighter than all other warriors. Speak to me now, muses who dwell on Olympus, for you goddesses know and see all, while we mortals know nothing and hear only rumors. Who were the lords and their leaders of the Danaans? For I could not speak their numbers or names, not even if I possessed 10 tongues or 10 mouths, or a tireless voice or a heart made of bronze, unless the Olympian muses, daughters of Zeus, send to my mind all those who gathered in Ilios. Now I will describe the many ships and their leaders. The Boeotians were led by Peneleos and Leitus, along with Arcesilas, Prothanor, and Clonius. These men came from Hyria, rocky Aulis, Sconus, Scolus, mountainous Aetnus, Thespia, Grae, and the wide spaces of Mycalcis. They dwelt in Harma, Elysium, Erthyre, Ilion, Hyle, Pition, Ocalia, the well-built citadel at Medion, Copai, Eutresis, and Thisbe, refuge for wild doves. They ruled Cornea and the grasses of Halatrius. They made homes in the lands of Plataea, Glycias, the well-built citadel of Lower Thebes, and holy Onchestus, the splendid grove of Poseidon. And they lived in Arne of the rich vines, Mydia, sacred Nyssa, and Anthedon by the seashore. In all, they set sail with 50 ships, each holding 120 young Boeotians. Those from Aspledon and Orchomenus of the Mysian were led by Ascalaphus and Elamius, sons of Ares. The revered maiden Astoyac bore him in secret for the god of war when she retreated to her chambers in the palace of Actor, son of Azeus. With them were 30 hollow ships. The leaders of the Phocians were Schedius and Epistrapidas, son of Iphitus, great-hearted son of Nabulus. They ruled over Cyparsius, rocky Pytho, divine Crissa, Daulis, and Panopius. They called Anna Maria and Hiemopolis home, and lived along the heavenly river Cepsis, where they held Lilia, beside the river springs. They followed in a fleet of 40 black ships, and they were marshaled into column formation and positioned to the left of the Boeotians. The Locrians were led by little Ajax, swift son of Oileus, who was smaller than Telamonian Ajax, wore a tight tunic of linen, and was the greatest spearman among all Panhellenines and Achaeans. He led the men from Sinus, Oppius, Calarius, Bessa, Scarphae, and the lovely Aguae, Tarphae, and Thronium on either side of the Boagrius river. Little Ajax led 40 black ships full of Locrians, who lived across the straits from holy Euboea. The fire-breathing Abantes occupied Euboea, Colchis, Eretria, vine-rich Histia, Cerinthus by the sea, and the steep-walled city of Dion. They also lived in Carstius and held Citra. Elephanor was their leader, companion of Ares, son of Chalcodon, and lord of the great-hearted Abantes. Following him were the swift Abantes, wearing their hair long in the back and wielding ashen spears able to shatter enemy breastplates. In all, Elephanor commanded 40 black ships. And those who dwelt in Athens, the well-built citadel, and home of great-hearted Eurystheus, who was born of the grain-giving earth but nurtured by Athena, daughter of Zeus, in her own rich temple in Athens, where each year young men sought to win his favor through the sacrifice of a bull or ram, were led by Menestheus, son of Peteos, who had no equal in commanding chariots and shield-bearing warriors. Only Nestor challenged him in this, being his elder. The Athenians followed their leader in 50 ships. Ajax led 12 ships from Salamis, who were stationed with the Athenian battalions in battle, and those who held Argos, high-walled Tyrannus, Hermine, a Sinine that occupies a deep bay. Trozen, Ioni, vine-rich Epidaurus, and the sons of the Achaeans who held Aegae and Masus were led by the skilled battle-crier Diomedes and Stylanus, prized son of famed Capaneus. A third came with them, Euryalus, godlike son of King Mecystus, who was the son of Talius. But the leader was the skilled battle-crier Diomedes, who led a fleet of 80 black ships. Those who held the well-built citadel at Mycenae, wealthy Corinth, and the well-built Cleonaia, and those who lived in Ornea, pleasant Arathia, and Sicyon, where Adastratus was first made king, and those with homes in Hypersia, Gonetia, on a steep cliff, and Pelene, and those around Aeginium, Aiglos, and wide Hellas were led by the son of Atreus, Agamemnon, who commanded 100 ships and the largest army, with the bravest soldiers, and proudly wore gleaming gold, for he distinguished himself above all other warriors, both in nobility and in leadership. And those who held hollow rifted Lacedaemon, Pharis, Sparta, and Messae, the haunt of doves, and those from Bryce and lovely Aguae, and those from Amyclae and Helos, citadel by the sea. Los and Otylis were led by great war-crier Menelaus, who commanded 60 ships, arming them apart from the others. He went among them with great confidence, urging them to battle, for he was most anxious to avenge all of Helen's fighting and groaning. Then came those who inhabited Pylos, fair Arene, Thyrum, the ford of Alpheus, well-built Api, Cyparsius, Amphigonine, Platios, Helos, and Dorium, where the Muses met the Thracian Thramius, and stopped his singing as he travelled from the house of Eurytes in Ochelia, for he boasted of winning the daughter of Zeus, even if the Muses themselves sang against him. In their anger they maimed him, silencing his sweet voice and preventing him from playing the lyre. They were led by horseman Nestor of Gerenia, and with him were 90 ships lined up in rows. And those holding Arcadia under steep Mount Cyllenia, by the barrow of Atreus, where warriors fight hand to hand, and those from Phinios, sheep-rich Orchomonius, ripe Stratia, and windy Insipe, and those in Tegea, charming Mantinea, Stymophilus, and Parrhasia, were led by the son of Andachius, King Achapenor with 60 ships, each one filled with many Arcadian warriors, all highly skilled in combat. As they had no interest in seafaring, Agamemnon, son of Atreus and king of men, provided them well-benched ships so they could cross the wine dark sea. And those who dwelt in Buprasium and famed Elis, from the lands of Hymomenes and Myrsinus, by the sea to the rock of Olin and Alasium, had 4 leaders. Each leader was followed by 10 ships, and each ship was filled with Achaean fighters. 2 were led by Amphimachus and Thalpius, one the son of Citius, the other of Eurytus. Another was led by Diores, son of Amarionicus, and the fourth was led by Polyxenius, son of King Estathians, and grandson of Aguais. Then those from Dulichium and the holy islands of the Achaeani, who dwell across the sea from Elis, were led into battle by Meges, equal to Ares and son of the horseman Phylos, dear to Zeus, who long before enraged at his father, went to live in Dulcium. With Meges followed 40 black ships. And Odysseus led the great-hearted Cephallenians, who dwelt in Ithaca and windy wooded Neritum, along with those who lived in Croclaia and rugged Aglipus, those holding Zacynthus and the area near Samos, and those on the mainland opposite the isles. They were led by Odysseus, equal to Zeus in council, on 12 ships with red prows. And the Aetolians who lived in Pleuron, Olanius, Pylone, Chalons by the sea, and rocky Calydon, were led by Thoas, son of Andromedon, for the sons of great-hearted Oeneus were gone, as was the king himself, and yellow-haired Meleager was also dead. Thus the burden of rule over all Aetolians passed to him. He led a contingent of 40 black ships. Idomeneus, the great spearman, led the Cretans, who dwelt in Cnossus, Gortian with its high walls, Lyctus, Miletus, the white cliffs of Lycostus, the cheerful cities of Phaestos and Rhytium, and all others who lived among the 1,000 cities of Crete. Their leaders were Idomeneus, expert spearman, and Meronius, equal of Enalius, slayer of men. Together they led 80 black ships to Troy. Telepomus, son of Heracles, a large and lanky man, led 9 ships out of Rhodes, all filled with lordly Rhodians, who divided into 3 groups: Lindos, Aliuses, and Camarius, with its white cliffs. Spear-famed Telepomus was born to mighty Heracles by Astauchia. Heracles took her out of Ephria by the Salius river, after sacking the city and slaying many warriors. And when Telepomus came of age in his father's palace, he killed Lycomenius, his father's beloved uncle, a child of Ares who had already grown old. He quickly built ships, gathered a large band, and escaped across the sea. For mighty Heracles' son and grandsons had threatened him, and after much weary wandering, he arrived at Rhodes, where his people settled into 3 distinct tribes. Zeus, master of men, favored them, and he rained a river of riches down upon them. Nireus led 3 balanced ships out of Cyme, the son of Aglae and King Charipos. Nireus was the second most handsome man among the Danaans after the noble son of Peleus, but he was powerless, and few men followed him. And those who dwelt in Nicereus, Carpathus, Cassis, Cos, Eurypylus, and the Caladian islands were led by Pheidippus and Antiphus, sons of King Thessalus, son of Heracles, and with them there sailed 30 hollowed ships. And all those who dwelt in Pelagonian Argos, Alus, Alope, Trachis, Pythia, and Hellas, land of fair women, and who were called Myrmidons and Hellenines and Archaeans, were commanded by Achilles, who led 50 ships. But they were not concerned with waging war, since there was no one to lead them into the ranks. Swift-footed Achilles was idling by his ships, enraged because of the fair-haired girl Briseis, whom he won after the sacking of Lynarnius and the Theban walls, and after striking down the spear fighters Myanes and Epiphius, sons of King Avienus, who was the son of Seleucus. He was idle in grief for her, but soon he would rise up. And those who dwelt in Phylace, flowery Pyrrhus, the sacred fields of Demeter, mother of sheep, Iton, and Tron by the sea, and the grassy banks of Platos, were once led by warlike Prostylius, but the black earth had long since covered him. He left a grieving wife in Phylace, and a house half finished when he was killed by a Dardanian, after being the first Achaean to leap from the ships. Though the men missed their leader, they were not leaderless. Podarches, scion of Ares, took charge, the son of Phylacus, and the younger full-blooded brother of great-hearted Prostylius. Still, warlike Prostylius was older than his brother and a better warrior. Thus, while the men had a leader, they mourned the great man they lost. And with Podarches there sailed 40 black ships. The 11 ships of those who lived in Phaerae beside Boebeis Lake, and in Bobai, Glapharai, and well-built Iolcus, were led by the beloved son of Admetus, Eumeles, born to Admetus by Alcestis, Pelias' most beautiful daughter. And those who lived in Methone, Thamachia, Meliboea, and rocky Olizon were led by the famed archer Philoctetes. On each of their 7 ships were 50 rowers, and each rower was an expert archer in battle. However, Philoctetes lay in overwhelming pain on the holy island of Lemnos, where the Achaean sons left him in great grief after a bad bite from a deadly water snake. But the Argives would soon remember King Philoctetes. Though the men missed their king, they were not without a leader, for Medon marshaled them, the bastard son of Oileus, whom Rhene bore to the pillager. And those who held Tricca, craggy Ithome, and Oechalia, the city of Oechalian Eurytus, were led by the 2 sons of Asclepius, the skilled healers Podalirius and Machon. Along with them sailed 30 hollowed ships. And those who held Ormiminium, the springs of Hyperia, Asterium, and the white peaks of Titanus, were led by Eurypylus, dear son of Euaemon, and with him sailed 40 black ships. And those who held Argissa and Gyrtone, Othe, Elone, and Oloacin, the city of white, were led by Polypoetes, staunch in the fight, the son of Pirithous, son of Zeus. Glorious Hippodamia conceived him to Pythareus on the day he exacted revenge from the hairy centaurs, forcing them out of Pelion and driving them to Aethiosus. He led with Leonidas, scion of Ares, son of great-hearted Coronis, who was Caeneus' son, and with them sailed 40 black ships. And Gonius led 22 ships from Cyphus, filled with the Enanines and the Parabi, and staunch fighters who built their homes in wintry Dodona and the fields around charming Titasius, the sweet stream that pours into the Peneus, but never merges with those crystal-clear waters. Instead, it floats over them like olive oil, for it is a branch of the Styx, the terrible river of oaths. And speedy Protheus, son of Tenthredon, was the leader of the Magonites, who dwelt around Paninius and leaf-covered Pelion. And with Prothus, there followed 40 black ships. These were the leaders and kings of the Danaans. But tell me, Muse, who were the best warriors and the best horses among the sons of Atreus? The best horses were those driven by Eumelus, grandson of Pheres, swift as birds, matching in color, and equal in age and in height. Apollo of the silver bow reared them in Perea, a pair of mares fueled by the fierce panic of war. The bravest warriors was Telamonian Ajax, so long as Achilles raged, for Peleus's noble son and the horses that drove him were by far the best. But he sat among his crooked sea-cleaving ships, enraged at Agamemnon, son of Atreus. His men by the seashore amused themselves with the discus, the javelin, the discus, the javelin, and the bow. Their horses stood idle, eating cloves and celery from the marshy ground, and the chariots were covered in the tents of their masters. The men, longing for their Ares blessed leader, wandered around the camp, but did not fight. So they advanced as if the earth was consumed in fire, and the land groaned as when Zeus, hurler of thunder, lashes out in anger at the land around Typhoeus in Eremoi, where the creature sleeps. And the earth roared beneath their feet as they marched along, moving quickly over the plain. When swift Iris, messenger for aegis-bearing Zeus, came to the Trojans with a grievous message. A general assembly of Trojans, both young and old, had gathered at Priam's gate. Swift Iris stood nearby and addressed them, disguising her voice to sound like Polites, the son of Priam, who was Troy's trusted lookout, posted atop the barrow of old Astyaeus, where he watched for the Achaeans to move from their ships. In his guise, swift-footed Iris said to them, "Old man, you always enjoy endless debate, but now endless war has sprung up. I have engaged in countless battles between warriors, but I have never before seen an army this size. As many feet charging over the plains to the city as there are leaves or grains of sand on a shore. Hector, there are many allies all over Priam's city, but they speak different tongues and come from different lands. So let each chief order the men from his tribe to assemble, and then lead them out of the city and into battle." Hector heeded the goddess's words and quickly dismissed the assembly to take up arms. Then the gates were opened, and with a rumbling roar the army marched out, on foot and on horse. In front of the city there is a steep hill far off in the distance, with a clear space all around it. The men call this hill Batia, but the gods call it in the grave Mound of Myrine, the Leaper. This is where the Trojans and their allies marshaled forces. The Trojan leader was gleaming helmed Hector, son of Priam. His army was by far the largest and the best, each man eager to wield his sword. The Dardanians were led by brave Aeneas, son of Anchises, whom Aphrodite conceived when she lay with the mortal at the spur of Mount Ida. He was aided by Antor's two sons, Archelaus and Acamas, both skilled in all manner of fighting. The Troes, who dwelt in Zelia, at the lowest foot of Ida, were wealthy men who drank the dark water of Aspius, and were led by the son of Lycaon, Pandarus, who was given a bow by Apollo himself. Those holding Adrastia and the land of Apasius, and those in Pitya and steep Mount Terea, were led by Adrastus and Amphius, who wore a tight tunic made of linen, sons of the soothsayer Merops of Percote, who would not allow his sons to join in war's destruction. But they did not obey him, for the black god of death drove their minds. And those living around Percote and Practius, and those who held Cestus, Abidius, and rich Arasbai, were led by Hyrtacus's son Asius, ruler of men, who came from Arisbe and the river Celius, borne by his massive chestnut horses. And the eager spearmen of the Pelasgi tribes who dwelt in fertile Larissa were led by Hippotheus and his brother Pelasgius, child of Ares, sons of Pelasgian Lethes, the son of Tetumus. Acamas and the hero Peridas led the Thracians who lived near the strong waters of the Hellespont. And Euphemus, son of Trojanus, cherished by Zeus, led the Ciconian spearmen. Pyomeces led the Paeonians of the curved bows, from far off Amodon, by the wide flowing Oxus, whose waters were the most beautiful on earth. The Paphlagians were led by brave-hearted Pylaemenes from Initai, land of wild mules. They held Cyprus, the area around Sesamus, and the grand homes by the Parthenos river in Chroma, Aeglus, and lofty Erythine. Odius and Epistratus led the Holosians from far off Alybe, the birthplace of silver. And the leaders of the Mysians were Chromisus and Ennomius, the soothsayer, who could not prevent his black fate, to be killed in the river by swift-footed Achilles, along with other Trojans. And the Phrygians from far off Ascania were led by the battle-ready Phorcys and godlike Ascanius. The Minoans from the foot Mount Tolmanus were led by Mesthles and Antiphus, sons of Talamenes and the nymph of the Gaiagan lake. And Nostes led the barbarous-tongued Carinians who held Miletus, the densely forested mountains of Phthries, the rivers of Maendor, and the high peaks of Mycale. Their leaders were Amphimachus and Nostes, the glorious sons of Nomion. Foolish Nostes came to the battle dressed all in gold, like a little girl, but it could not protect him from death, for he was killed in the river at the hands of swift-footed Achilles, and Achilles claimed the gold. And Sarpedon and noble Glaucus led the Lycians far off Lycia by the whirling river Xanthos.